Hello and welcome to another instructional video brought to you by ZappySys. In this video we're going to cover how you can use a custom ODBC driver to connect to JSON data. You can connect directly to a JSON file, or you can even connect to a REST API that returns JSON data. If your API doesn't return JSON data, don't worry, ZappySys has some other custom drivers that can connect to XML or CSV, but this video is all about JSON. As always, this is a custom driver you'll be able to use once you download and install the ODBC Power Pack, which you can get directly from ZappySys.com, hovering over Products, ODBC Power Pack, and download the free trial. And don't worry, I'll be sure to post a link for this in the description below. Okay, so once you have the Power Pack installed, I'm going to just search for the Gateway Configuration tool. And I'm going to allow it to make changes, and up pops the configuration tool. The first thing you'll want to do is hop over to the Users tab, and if you don't have any users created already, just add a login, make sure the password's the same, and you're going to need at least one administrator. I already have those 2 users, so I'm going to stick with those. And also be sure to go to the Network Settings tab and add a firewall rule so that other machines from the local network can reach the gateway on port 5000. There we go. Other than that, we'll just hop back over to the Data Sources tab and make a new data source. So I'm going to click Add. I'm going to give it a name. We'll call it ZS Gateway. And I'm going to use the ZappySys JSON Driver. First thing is, you'll probably notice there's a radio button for Simple View or Advanced View. So if you choose the Advanced View, you'll be able to see properties in this format, and you can search for properties if you know the name of, but I'm not going to use this view. I'm just going to use the very simple view. So like I mentioned, you can connect directly to a JSON file if you have one, let's say, on your machine somewhere, and you know where it is. You can specify that. If you have multiple files and they're all in the same format, you can add an asterisk and you can load multiple at once. I'm just going to use an API because that's what I think is really cool about this driver. And I already have this URL copied on my clipboard, so I'm going to paste it in there, and notice you'll see some special configuration pop up below. So the first thing to specify is the connection type, and that's usually going to require some user credentials. So I'm using a very simple API. Yours might be very complex and specific to your needs. So always refer to your API documentation for how to manage your connection, especially for things like credentials or authentication. You might be using HTTP, and you can click the continue button to specify, is it a user ID and password, or do we need dynamic 2-step tokens? Some use OAuth, so you can click that and then manage your custom OAuth settings. This is going to be very specific to your needs. I'm just doing a very basic example that has no credentials, so I'm going to stick to that. Next, you'll want to specify the request method. So if you're just getting data, you're probably going to use the get method. But suppose you're writing data to some data source. You can use the post method, and you can add parameters in the body by clicking this little edit pencil, and you can specify those. You can add parameters in the URL. You can even edit the headers if you want to do that using this little icon. Again, I'm just doing a very simple example, so I'm going to use the get method, and I'm going to select that. Something else that's really important is this array filter down here. So this is where the actual flattening happens. So I'm going to select this select filter option, and this is where you can see some arrays that are available from your API. You might be using a single array, you might be using a nested array. I'm just going to select this value option. But, if you know the specific needs of the data hierarchy that you're looking for, feel free to specify that. But you don't have to. It's just totally optional. Just wanted to show you that it's there. So that's it. This is a pretty simple example with basic settings, but that's really all you need to set up a connection And you can make sure everything works by clicking the test connection button. And there we go. It works. Great. So if you'd like, you can generate SQL that we'll say, sure, that represents this particular data connection. You can also copy the settings. So let's say you wanted to copy this driver and make another one on either this machine or maybe copy it to another machine. You can say copy settings, select the settings you'd like. There we go. Now it's on our clipboard. And then on the recipient machine or wherever you'd like to load them, use this little load settings option. So super handy, super portable. And even with this generate SQL, one thing I didn't mention is you can overwrite. So right now here it has our little URL for the API that we want to use. But if you'd like, you can overwrite this particular URL. So it doesn't only have to use this particular setting. You can overwrite things at runtime. That's a little handy feature to know. Okay, so we have a working connection. What data are we getting? Let's hop over to the preview tab. Straight away, you'll notice that it has a default query that we've already been populated with. So it may work out of the box for you like that. You can try the preview data to see so, and there we go. We have some rows down here, but already I noticed that I'm asking for 100 rows and I'm only getting 20. So there may be some other configuration for things like pagination that we still need to specify, and we'll talk about that one in just a minute. But what if we want some other data? We can use this little drop down and pick another table that's available from our API, and we see that some data is available. And this is handy if you don't know all of the columns in every table, or you're not sure where a column comes from. You can see which columns are in these endpoints. But you can also do other flexible things. So, if you want to comment out a column, if you want to do a block comment for some columns, if you want to give a column an alias, you can do that. And we'll do preview data again. So here we see, now we have state and we see less columns. So just know you can use this little SQL editor to write some custom SQL for the data that you would like to return. If you're not sure of how to write that SQL, that's okay too. You can use this little query builder tool. So notice down here I have a new SQL editor, and as I click and modify these settings, you'll notice that other SQL is getting added. So then you can copy this SQL to the clipboard, and now you have it. Or you can use some examples, if you want to see specific examples. So there's lots of help here. You're not on your own on how to use this particular SQL editor. So again, I'm going to just preview data one more time. Nothing has really changed. And just know once you do preview the data, your metadata gets loaded for you automatically. So that's handy. But like I said earlier, I'm only getting 20 of the rows, and I'm expecting or allowing up to 100. So how do we manage that? So to update the pagination config, I'm going to go back to the Properties tab, and now I'm going to go over to the Pagination tab. And you'll notice there's a lot of options here for pagination. That's okay. I'll just remind you again to refer to your API documentation for your specific needs. But for this example, I'm going to hop down to this next linked cursor expression field, and I'm going to click these three dots. So I know this API response that I'm getting includes the more data link in this particular API attribute. So I'm going to select that one. Now I'll go back to the preview tab, and I'll click the preview button. And there we go. We have 91 rows. So we're getting more data than the initial 20 that we got. And this would appear that all 91 rows of the table are being returned because we didn't reach our maximum for 100. So that's cool. One other thing to mention has to do with performance. So again, there's a lot of flexibility with these queries and what you can do. Let's say I'm going to use a custom SQL. I'm going to use this view examples, and I'm going to do this group by, limit, order by option. So this will show you how to use these clauses. Okay, great. So here we have some custom SQL that uses a different URL. Like I said, this one's going to use the invoice table. So don't forget, you can overwrite the URL at runtime. And he's doing a sum with some order by clauses. So just know that, okay, we can preview this data, and there we go. We get some measures by country, which is exactly what this thing does. But when you're doing all of this heavy lifting, it's going to invoke the client-side engine. It's going to get data from the server. It does aggregates on the client side. So just know that there is this feature available, but there might be some performance hits to keep in mind, because notice this took almost a full second. So just know, I just wanted to point that out, that you may notice some things with performance that you'll want to address. I'm also showing a lot of, even though this one does aggregates, it's a pretty simple SQL statement, and it only uses one table, whereas you're not limited to just something from one table. You can come into this custom objects tab, and you can create new stored procedures. You can create new virtual tables that this DSN can use. You can even come over to this examples tab for some more SQL examples on how to use certain syntax, on how to join another URL, or if you want to look at array transformations, if you want to look at functions, if you need help with that. So just know that there's a lot of power and flexibility with the SQL editor, and it does a whole lot more than just getting data from one particular table. And you'll also notice back on the properties tab, we're only really looking at the settings tab and the pagination tab. You have advanced features for throttling, for error response. Down here you have data format, pivoting columns. So there's a lot of advanced features that we didn't even cover. But that's really it. Once you have a working configuration, so I'll test it one more time. Yep, it works. So I'm going to say OK. And when you're ready, you can just click OK. And there we have it. We just created a new ODBC driver that connects to a JSON API data source. That's how easy it is and flexible it is to use this custom ZappySys JSON driver. Okay, so we've already covered how to create a gateway connection. We've created a user account for the gateway. We've made sure the firewall settings are configured properly, and we've connected to an API data source. Now let's see how we can use the data from this gateway as a linked server in SQL Server. So as you can see, I have an instance of SQL Server open already. I'm just going to create a new linked server, and I'm going to do it first the manual way so you can see this, and then I'm going to show you the super easy way to do it. So let's give it a name. I'm going to call it the manual way. And we're going to use SQL Server 11. Our data source is localhost on port 5000. And the catalog has to be the exact name of the gateway. We used CS gateway. Last, I'm going to go to the security, and I'm going to make sure it uses our gateway user. And there we go. You see our linked server over here. So that was the manual way, and that was a lot of typing. I'm going to open up a new query editor, and now I'm going to go back to the gateway configuration tool. I'm going to go to the app integration tab, and now I'm going to get a script to do all of this for me. So I'm going to call it gateway. I'm going to make it use our gateway that we made. And I'm going to generate the code. So one thing we have to do down here, specify our user. And now let's just copy this code into SQL Studio. So I'm going to run this script to make us our automated gateway. So I'm going to refresh it. And there we have the one we just made. So now what can we do? We can query from, let's keep using the customers table. And there's our data. You know, we could even do something like, let's copy that. And let's make a view. We'll just call it VW Gateway. Let's make sure we do as. There we go. Not VS, VW. And there's our data again. So that's a live view as a view from that API source. That's how easy it is to retrieve data from the API using a gateway service and then making that as a linked server in SQL Server. I know that sounds super complicated, but hopefully you get the idea of how flexible it is and how easy it is to get that data real time in SQL Server from an API. If you want to give it a try, but you haven't already downloaded the ODBC Power Pack yet, go ahead and do that now. And don't forget, the link is in the description below. And as always, be sure to subscribe to the ZappySys YouTube channel to get more tips and tricks like this and other updates in the future.